أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Eid Mubarak to you all. Well, a bit belated, but Alhamdulillah, me and my wife, we were very, very blessed in order to spend throughout the last 10 days of Ramadan. And is this on? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I'll have to put it quite close to mine. Do you need me with the mic? Shall I keep the mic?
Yep.
We were very blessed in order to spend the last 10 days of Ramadan and Eid in Jerusalem. And one of my reflections really of my time there was probably the highlight of the trip, to be honest, was when we were actually praying the Eid prayer there. Masjid Aqsa, it's a strange situation there, to be honest, because if you think about Mecca and you think about Medina, they're packed throughout the year. There's constantly people from all over the world traveling there. But the third holiest site in Islam is actually Masjid Aqsa. But unfortunately, it's been very, very neglected because a lot of Muslim countries can't actually, if you come from particular Muslim countries, you can't even travel there. And also, the Muslim countries where people are able to travel there, they don't think it's safe enough to travel there. But that's what we realised there. It's not the case. And what's really strange about it is that because in Ramadan, they actually allow people from the West Bank and the surrounding localities to actually come in to actually visit, to attend the Friday prayers there and the last 10 days. And so the whole place is brimming with people. But as soon as they close off, as soon as Ramadan ends, it's like a ghost town. And you don't really see a large Muslim presence there. And so we really got to see both sides. It was quite a weird experience to actually be in this hub of people from all over. There's mainly people from South Africa, from Turkey. There were many, many people. A lot of the Muslim African countries were there as well, and many, many people from England. And when we were the Eid prayer there, it was really phenomenal for me. I mean, I've only really experienced that in Mecca and in Medina when we spent Ramadan, the last Ramadan there, where you excuse me, where you see hordes of people celebrating the Eid prayer. But not just that, so you've seen people from all different nationalities. But what was really special about Masjid Aqsa was that it was you really felt it was a family environment. We had children running all over the place, causing havoc, and but there weren't people shouting at them saying, control your children and so forth. You were given full license actually to let them go mad. And what was really beautiful is what we did is we prayed the Fajr prayer, and then we stayed there until the actual Eid prayer comes in, because in most Muslim countries what happens with the Eid prayer is that they pray it as soon as like about 20 minutes, half an hour after sunrise. And so people generally, what they do, they come down for the Fajr prayer, and then they stay there until the Eid prayer. And so what happens is, because obviously we're not fasting, it's a sunnah, and I was thinking, how are they going to do this? It's a sunnah to actually eat something after the Fajr prayer to show that you're not fasting. It's a display that this is a day of celebration and we're not fasting. So the way they did this, it was quite profound, is that we were all sitting there after Fajr, and then everyone got baklava out basically, and sweets, and everyone was going around sharing all the sweets, and it became a real festive sort of feeling. And so it was really, really beautiful. And then we had something that's really missing, I feel, in our community, specifically here in Yorkshire, is that the takbirs of the Eid prayer from constantly going until the Imam comes out for the sermon. That's something really, really profound. You really feel like you're part of a community of some people that feel they've achieved something. And so we were sitting in this environment, and then the Imam, he gave a very point. I was surprised. Usually sermons send me to sleep. It's usually Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and and then someone nudges you. But this one, actually, I was quite surprised. Was the Imam, being an elderly gentleman, he had some really profound message. Really, he said he stood up on the sermon, on the pulpit, and he addressed the people, and he said, I don't know, he says, I'm confused today because I've had mixed emotions of joy and of frustration and sadness. And so when he went on to explain, he says, obviously, Eid, what is Eid all about? And so this is what I wanted to start with. Eid really is a celebration of what we've achieved. Okay, and so we can learn many lessons, and I'm just going to focus on one thing because of time. The time doesn't permit me to go into too much detail. But we have to realize that we have something very, very profound as Muslims in the month of Ramadan, on a very, practical level, the fast. And when we look at the fast, we really have to understand how profound the fast is, because it addresses us on a physical level, it addresses us on a spiritual level, it addresses us on a communal level, a relational level, and it addresses many other aspects, social and economical, all sorts of manners of spheres we can address fasting. But primarily what it teaches us, especially for our young children, I think first and foremost is you can achieve something. And I think that's very, very important. What do I mean by that? Is that we come together as a community and we're fasting, and you're showing that you're going through a struggle, something's very difficult, but you've actually achieved it. And that's really important for our youngsters to appreciate this. And when I say this, I'm not saying that you should force your children to fast before the age of puberty. All I'm saying is let them have a go. Because I've noticed that when I was teaching in the madrasa, I would say to the children, go and fast. How many can you do this year? I'd say, how much Quran can you read, and how many fasts can you do this year? How many did you do last year? Can you beat your score last year? And then they would go home and they would say, Mum and Dad won't let me fast. And that really disappointed me, because what we're really saying here is that we're saying basically you can't do it. And you have to understand psychologically what that does to someone growing up, basically. Usually our children have high ambition to do things. They have a lot more drive than we do. They get out of bed far more easily than we do. They're like, Dad, Mum, get out of bed. The days come. And so children have this energy, they have this purpose. And it's really important that we hone that and we encourage it and nurture it. And fasting is one way for children and ourselves to understand amazing things we can achieve. That's on a spiritual level. We're learning that we can achieve great things. So when we achieve things, we celebrate them. If you notice our school education system, you've passed, you got an A, you got 90%, well next time get 100. And it's so target driven. If you notice the work environment today, the educational system, so target driven that people basically just can't be bothered anymore, because it's never good enough. You reach your targets this year, and then so next year we have to up the targets. So what happens is people eventually just become fed up. So it's very important that when we do achieve something, we celebrate it. And we see, I wonder what we can achieve next time, but not putting too much onus on, pushing people too hard. And so that's one thing about fasting for us as a community. The second thing is so we said about the about achievement and believing in our children they can achieve things, and believing in ourselves that we can achieve things. It's a very practical example, fasting, of that. Okay. The next thing with fasting is what we're doing when we're fasting. We are teaching ourselves a very profound lesson that society teaches us the complete opposite. That is that we don't have to act upon our emotions and our feelings, which children really have to learn at a very early age. I.e., I'm sitting there, I want to eat that, but I'm looking at the bigger picture, and I think I'm going to get more reward if I fast. Okay, there's a greater benefit in me actually holding off from what I want to do for something far greater, and if I get that, it will be I'm going to benefit so much more. And so if you've ever heard of the marshmallow test that they had, where they got these kids, basically you can have 1 marshmallow or 10 marshmallows if you hold off. And they found those children that could exercise self-control, not act on just their whims and their fancies and what they always want to do. My Buddha's getting whatever he wants, sort of mentality. They found those children, they followed them through into their adulthood, and they had far greater, they succeeded far greater in their education, in their careers, in their relationships, and just across the board. Why? Because they could learn that lesson of, hang on, I want to do that, but I'm not going to do it because I realise that there's something else I could do that's greater, of greater benefit for myself and for the other people around me. That's basically life, if you think about it. That's the whole concept of paradise and hell, if you think about it, is that there's something far greater that I should think about doing. I should think about what I do before I actually act upon it and whether it's worth doing or not. That's what fasting does on a very, very practical level. And so this is something else that we're teaching ourselves psychologically. And we sometimes I don't think we give credit to what fasting really does for us. And so there are two things. Then what's really interesting, so we celebrate the Eid, and what's profound, in a hadith it's narrated that when we leave the Eid prayer, the angels around the prayer area, because in a lot of Muslim countries they don't actually pray in the mosque, they pray in an area like a field. In Morocco, it was amazing where we used to, this is the most profound Eid prayer for me, was we pray on top of a graveyard hill in Fez. So people would basically walk through the graveyards until they reach the very top of the hill, and you can see the whole of the ancient city below you of Fez. And because it's on a hilltop, the PA systems are knocking off one another, the echoes of the takbirs. And it's really, really profound. And so we would do this in this area. And then what the Prophet ﷺ says, when you leave that area, the angels give out the prizes. And these are not physical prizes. These are what you've taken from Ramadan. And so that's something very, very important, is that what lessons have I taken from Ramadan? And I believe what I've just touched upon with fasting, very profoundly, we learn very many life lessons. And this is what we need to inculcate in the next generation and in ourselves as well, what we can achieve. And so straight away, what's so interesting about the fast is, what do? After we eat and celebrate what we've achieved in those 30 days, then straight away the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, what does he encourage? He encourages us to do another 6. Now the scholars differ about, do they 6 be straight up? Probably in our community that's impossible to do 6, because we think Eid's 3 days and we've got to go around all the families and visit everybody and eat and socialise. So some say 6 straight after, but other scholars say no, you can break it up as long as it's in the month of Shawwal. But what are you doing here? So the Prophet ﷺ, he says, whoever fasts the month of Ramadan and then follows it up by 6 days after Shawwal, it's as if he's fasted the whole year. Okay, it's as if he's perpetually fasting throughout the year. Now, what do we learn from this? Because as soon as you finish Ramadan, it's very easy to do what? To forget what you've achieved. So you just fall back into habit again, and you forget all about what you've actually done in Ramadan. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he says, no, don't go back into those habits. You're not going to be able to keep everything you achieved in Ramadan, because that's impossible for most people. But you can take something, and these are the prizes that the angels give out. Something that you can look back, 4 months after Ramadan, no matter how small it is, and think, hang on a minute, there's been a shift. There's been a change in my life. I'm doing things slightly different. And that's what we really want from Ramadan. And that's what, in Ramadan, when the Prophet ﷺ says, he talks about, how can you not be forgiven in the month of Ramadan? And one of the greatest expressions of forgiveness is where you've managed to change the habit. So there was something you did that you feel shameful about, and you wish that you couldn't do it, and then you ask Allah to forgive you, and then you notice after a certain period that you don't even think about that anymore. Before, it would overwhelm you and you don't just know how to break that habit. Suddenly there's a shift. That's one of the ways the scholars mention, is that you've been forgiven by God, because He's given you the ability to actually get rid of that out of your life, where before you knew it was near enough impossible for you to do. And so that's what it calls us on Ramadan, is first and foremost, where's the shifts? How are they? And they might not, you might not feel those until a certain period. It's just like Hajj. When people come back from Hajj, that people, they think, what is it? Okay, when they feel so down, I've not been able to change myself. But that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes those little changes are so subtle that you really have to analyze and think about, no, there is a shift. And those are the real important shifts, those really subtle ones, because they're the ones that really You don't find difficulty in them. And that's then you feel what? You feel a huge sense of gratitude that God's given you something that you couldn't have achieved through your own efforts. And so that's what we need to look at after Eid. That's very, very important. The other thing is to not give up on this gift of fasting, to not neglect it, because fasting is not just Ramadan. And now we're only just realizing, honestly, the studies in nutrition now and health, they used to believe that it was the best approach to health was to eat small meals continuously throughout the day. Now they're realizing that's absolutely false, and rather the human being, and they've known this throughout the human life, is that humans never perpetually ate. It was impossible. They were hunters and gatherers, and there were times, they say 2/3 of man's life he went hungry, and then once you got the chow down, you can get as much energy as you want, eat, and then you store that energy. And that's basically how we work as human beings. And so that's why they realised now intermittent fasting, isn't it they call it? Intermittent fasting is like exercise. They literally say, they say when you are fasting, it's as if your body is doing exercise. And so they encourage, this is the non-Muslim, and the research is coming out now, that people should fast twice a week, which is very profound because the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he encouraged this. And that you realise, I always say this, when your tummy's growling, it doesn't mean you're hungry, it means it's relieved that you're not putting any more food in it. It's all a matter of perspective, isn't it? And so what's happening is your body, when you're not putting something in it, now it's able to actually restore the damage that you've done. And so I always like to use the example of the numbskulls. Does anyone remember the numbskulls? Was it Beano or Dandy numbskulls? Was it the Dandy? There was these little men that lived in the body. Do you remember? Probably the youngsters are thinking, what on earth are you going on about? But Raj is nodding his head anyway. So there was these little, and they basically got their little departments where they work. You got the brain section department, you got the stomach department. So when you're fasting, what are you actually doing? They actually can relax and start thinking about, we might need to change the wallpaper in here. And they can start actually working and improving the area instead of constantly working and neglecting the restoration that needs actually to go on in the body. They're just trying to process the food that's constantly coming. And so that's a very good analogy for us to understand what we're doing when we're fasting. And so fasting is a huge gift. And I think if Muslims, no matter where we are in our level of practice, we really need to realise, fasting is probably the most tangible, I think, act of worship that we have as Muslims, and we really shouldn't neglect that throughout the rest of the year because of all these lessons that we have. And I think one of the greatest profound spiritual things about fasting is that it's a non-act. And what we do as Muslims, we fall into this because everyone's got to be so productive. We're in the productive age where we should always be doing things, but we're exhausting ourselves because we need to give our bodies a break. And what's fasting is a non-act. So you are worshipping Allah, you're worshipping God Almighty by doing nothing when you're fasting. The reality is, you're just sitting there doing nothing. And sometimes you just need to do that in life. You just need to sit back and you need to realise, hang on a minute, I just need to experience God in my life. Rather than, I'm not doing enough as a Muslim, I need to be praying more, I need to read more Quran, I need to do this, I need to be, this and this and this. And you use your religion to make yourself even more stressed and miserable. While in the reality, your religion's supposed to bring in that sense of, zest and vitality in your life. And if it's not doing that, there's a problem in the relationship. Just think about it with your children or your wife or your husband. If there's tension in the relationship and you're stressed in your relationship, you need to change the whole dynamics. And it's the same thing with God, in our relationship with God. We need to, if we're stressed in our relationship with God, then we've got to sort it out. And one of those practices is fasting. Stop doing things, just do a non-act for a time being, and just experience, that process of in the day and reflection of breaking the habits. Because eating is very much a habitual thing that takes us away from being focused in the moment. Because you wake up, what do? Breakfast. I wake, then go to work. When's lunch? Then you come home. When's she going to put my dinner on the table? So you fall into these habitual patterns, and you're just going along with the flow. What fasting does, it actually breaks that pattern. You think, hang on a minute, I was going to eat breakfast, but now I can't. What should I do with my time now? And you're caused to be living in the the moment. So it's really, really profound, and we as Muslims, we really need to reflect on how profound these little simple things are. That other faiths, they don't have these gifts. And just to stress to ourselves, remind ourselves, and remind our children, our families of these little things. And so I pray after, these days of Eid, we can actually look back and realise those shifts. And that becomes the real Eid. The real celebration is when we've experienced Allah bringing about that change through ourselves. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك عملنا ثم ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا نكون من الخاسرين. I ask Abu Bakr, Raj, and all the brothers, Ridwan and Alam, is it the brother at the Alam, that all the people that made this event possible, that you bless them and reward them. If they had any intention behind this gathering, ask Allah to grant it for them. If there's any need they have in their life, they need to be Allah grant them that need. So ask all of us that we really feel a sense of gratitude in that we have a connection with God Almighty. It's something, a real blessing that we need to just celebrate, just to experience that. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us more appreciative and into a real embodied, integral experience of religion in our lives and spirituality. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that no one leaves this gathering except all their sins are forgiven and all their needs are fulfilled, all their worries and woes are removed, all their debts are cleared, and all their needs in this life and the next are fulfilled. Ask Allah to bless our children. No matter what their path is, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you protect them and be there for them, and that we're stewards just taking care of them, but in the end that we have to let them go on their own way. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you always keep them firm, or those that are distance themselves, you bring them back and give them understanding in their life about their relationship with you. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us understanding in our relationship with God, and that you help us and direct us towards that which is beneficial for us in this life and the next. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you keep us healthy and safe in our well-being, physically, spiritually, financially, mentally. Allah protects us in all those spheres of our life. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us and bless our loved ones and our parents and our children and our spouses, our immediate families and extended families. Have mercy upon this ummah. Actually, Raj wanted me to touch on this, didn't you? About this, we live in difficult times, but the reality is we live in exciting times. I look at it completely differently. There's work to do, and that makes us wake up and do something. And that's the reality of the situation. Muslims, we always see that Allah has a plan, and I believe this is a really opportune moment for Muslims to stop sleeping and living in their little ghettos and finally start interacting and doing some work with the wider community. This is why this is happening. It's imperative that we as Muslims stop hiding and want to be in a little safe space. We literally have to get out there now, and we have to work on issues that concern the whole community. Stop thinking about ourselves. This is why Allah's doing this. We literally have to get out there, and what are matters that concern us as a community, and so that we start talking with one another. And it's when we talk that we start, and we not just talking, we're working on a project together. We're doing something. What's a concern in our community? How can we do that together to do something? That's when the shift happens. I always give this example. Fasting is one of those. What is fasting? Fasting is a communal struggle towards a greater goal. And when you feel purpose in your life and you're struggling with others, you feel an interconnectedness. Very practical, and I'll give you a perfect example of that. When we were in Keighley a few years, I don't know about it was in Bradford, but we had literally black ice across the roads. We literally were crawling on our hands and legs to get across the roads. Do you remember that? I was walking down Highfield Lane, and there was a young white lass. She wound down a window and she said to me, "You right there, love? Do you need any help? You okay?" And I said, any other day that woman wouldn't give me she wouldn't even looked at me. But because we're struggling through something together, you just naturally feels this interconnectedness and concern for one another. That's what fasting does, because you know that the other people in the community are struggling along as well, and that we're there for one another. And then why is that? Why we feed one another at the end, so we feel that even greater connection. Why is it on the Eid we're asked to give out zakat al-fitr, so that other people can? We don't just celebrate by rewarding ourselves. We celebrate by giving to others so they can rejoice as well. Very, very profound things we have, in order to serve the community. So ask Allah. That's the lesson I want people to understand, is that we have to have concern and connect, and that's the ultimate weapon against those people that have ill intentions. And that's why we have to be strong sometimes. We can't be passive and say to people, we just show goodness and they will show goodness back. There's times for that, and there's times when we have to express this is not right, this is wrong. People can't be saying these things. And so we need people who have the ability to do that. But on a more communal level, we have to look at what are concerns, what are issues in our community that concern us all. How can we work together on that? I think that's the most profound way that we're contributors to society. And we're not hiding away and it's keeping in our safe spaces. There's no time for that anymore. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us and protect all the communities around us, and that any of the policies that are going through, that they serve us and are for our betterment, and any of those that are not for our betterment, they just fall on their faces. Basically, those policies and that are trying to be implemented, those people that wish evil for the community, it falls back on their faces. Basically, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless all the Muslim community that's suffering around the world. Allah be there for them. Allah bring us back. Those who have lost loved ones, Allah replace their sorrow with happiness and joy. Those who have lost loved ones, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you grant them the highest stations in paradise. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you give us understanding of why this is all happening in our life. You give us that sort of grounding and where we feel strong in our faith, and that these events don't shake us. Rather, they only increase us in faith. And so it's just a matter of perspective. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give us the right perspective in these events that are happening around us, and that we all die in a full state of faith. And our last words being La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And on the Day of Judgment, we see the true fruits of that when we're reunited with the one that brought it to us, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. On that day, he be there for us. On that day, he embraces us. On that day, he enables us to drink from his pious and blessed and noble hand, a drink that will never thirst from ever again. And he take us by the hand as enter us into paradise without any reckoning or trial or test. And we be forever, all of those who we know, all those who we love, in his company, gazing upon your countenance for eternity and beyond, and that's not difficult for you, Ya Allah. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Thank you very much for your attentive listening.